In this lesson, we'll continue to construct one of the backgrounds for the Rocket Randee animation. We'll start adding some additional layers to flesh out the far background and change some of the colors. The other thing we'll be doing is adding a bit of a camera move to get a sense of the dimension. And at the end of this video, I discovered that the camera lens is far too long, which we'll address in the following video. All right, so let's get at it. Okay, now that we have some elements laid in, I would like to add a little bit of a camera move. It's not good to spend too much time spacing everything apart if you're not going to move your camera, because the movement of the camera really tells you how well your objects are reading and their distances. And if you take a look here in the custom view, you can see that the objects are really far apart. Like this isn't realistic in any way. And it's partly to do with the fact that we have such a long lens. Now, if you actually look at this and look at how they're getting bigger and bigger, the objects are getting bigger and bigger, it's actually getting bigger and bigger in a very similar angle as the camera's view angle. So if you were to take that line and follow it out, it would pretty closely match what's going on right here. So you can see actually what's happening. So things are very exaggerated in this world, and building a very realistic miniature set where everything's spaced perfectly apart doesn't always create the best results. So it's important to play with your cameras, and I used to try to structure everything really realistically, but then I really struggled to get the sense of depth that I was going for, because my spaces would be so small in between everything that I'd need these insane cameras to actually get any depth out of the scene. And then when I would move something, it would just look so bad and exaggerated. Like, it was really hard to control it. So I find building it inside of your camera with the type of camera you want to work with is a better way to go. So with that said, what I'd like to do is I've created a backup camera. And now what I want to do is just key the point of interest in the position. And then I'll do a couple moves. It really depends on the actual final moves. And what you can see here is we are getting quite a bit of depth. Now we'll see more. So if you see I'm like panning in and out here, or pushing in and out, just pick a position here. And I'll pull this camera over here. Okay, we're going back to the trees. Then over here, we'll put the camera right to the edge of view before we break everything. So that's the range that we have. And you can see the level of depth that we're getting in, and perhaps that some of these buildings are a little too far away. So let's just play a bit of that. Really important to preview things if you can. And if you really don't have much RAM, then just make the move a lot faster. Okay, so then we'll just preview it, let it run through. And we'll start to get a sense of how our depths are reading. And I have a feeling that those buildings way in the back there are too far back. That's like another downtown. Sort of like LA, there's one downtown and then there's another one way far away. But you can see we're getting some really nice separation. See, there is some good depth there. The only place I'm not really liking is this very far back building, and potentially the stuff that's in between this middle lit building and the one here. So let's go in and quickly fix that. So this is the time to remedy any of those problems where we might have gone a little bit overboard, or I might have gone overboard in spacing things apart, trying to get some depth out of the scene. So these guys back here are simply way too far away. So let's have a look. We have 40,053. Let's put this at 45. 1, 2, 3. And even then, that might still be too far back. Pretty far back. And let's actually reverse this, because this is more what the camera is going to be doing. So let's time reverse frames, and we'll just dolly over, so we can get an actual sense of the real move that we'll be doing, which will be revealing the city as we move over. And I'm not really liking what's happening in that shape. I might want to crush those a lot closer together. Okay, so let's do that. Let's bring those closer in. So city 5 is at 45, this one's at 40, and this one's at 35. Let's see, that one's at 35, and the other one is at 30,000. So let's make this one at 35. We'll make this one at 37. And then we will, actually, let's keep that one there. Let's go make it 38,000. And then this one can be 41,000. There you go. And then what I can do is, I mean, we can reposition it a little bit. And then I'm not going to worry about scaling it. I don't mind the scale. The only thing I need to do is to fix these sky positions. So this sky I want to be at 40. And this sky here I want to be at 37. And then this sky here, sure, that's all right. The other thing you can do is you can parent these skies to the buildings themselves so that they always stay in a very similar relationship. That's another option so that you can play around and until you get things right. Okay, I think that's looking a little better. I think what I'd also like to do is maybe add some hills further back. So as we move over here, I see these hills here, which are moving. They seem very, very far in front of the buildings. So this is our last building's at 20,000. This hill's at 15. So maybe I want to let's grab hill number 2, or actually let's take hill 1, the very front one, and let's put this. I want to put it just in front of this building here. So we want it under this. And this one's at 20,000, so we're going to put it at, let's just put it at 18,000. Okay, so now it's way back there. Position it over. It's way too dark for where it is, but that's okay. So let's just scale this over, -109. I'm just rotating the angle. Now hopefully this should be hidden by a lot of our other structures. So I'm going to scale this up to a little bit. So let's scale this up. Let's bring it down. Now what this should do is give us a little bit of, well, I might actually rotate it back to, scale it back to a positive on the 147, because I really do want the hill there. Move this over until we actually get that hill in there. You can always rotate it a little bit. So, I mean, this is really your chance to play again, so I really take advantage of that. Maybe let's move this over a little more. Really, it's going to be pretty subtle. I might have to make it a bit higher. And actually, let's rotate it the other way. Rotate it more like that. See what that does for us. I just want to find a way to get a little more depth in here to give a sense that there's more hills and there's more stuff going on here than we can see. I might even put this hill, let's take this hill and actually put it behind this city one here. So let's put it at 22,000. And this city here, city number 2, is at 30. So we have a lot of room in here to add stuff. And then I'm going to reposition this so it's optimized for this area. I mean, you can use the warp tool too to actually change the shape of these hills a little bit if you want. But I like to really use my pieces almost like they're little puzzle pieces that I can continue to modify and make work the way I want them to, because it's kind of the fun part about this is like creating the collage essentially, because that's what you're doing. You have all these little model pieces and then you're building a set out of them. Okay, so now what I need to do with this is I really need to cool off that color in there. And so I can do this a couple ways, as I can add a tritone tint to that and select sort of a bluish tint and just sort of do the mix here until I get something I like. Now the other thing is it's so dark and that needs to come up because it's really quite far away, and plus the ground should be much lighter than the buildings regardless. We'll put this more, I'm going to just put this more to a yellow or a greenish color until I can find the look I'm going for. I'm going to kind of find the color that I want that looks nice. I'll just keep playing with it, but I think that looks a lot better. And I'm actually going to want to lighten up a lot of these hills because they're really, like, they are really too dark. They shouldn't be as, if you squint your eyes and look at this, they really shouldn't be as dark as the buildings. And I just need to create a little more difference because it's really becoming just this big dark shape. So let's brighten this one up too. Now the other way we can do this is we can adjust the curves, or you can also play with your hues and saturations and things like that. Because one of the downsides is it really washes it out. So delete that. We could go here and increase the lightness, but then also increase the saturation, which is a little bit of a better solution sometimes because we don't want to lose all our color. So I'm just trying to go to the point that this is brighter than the buildings and is not, but not as bright as the sky. Or it can be very similar because, I mean, if you imagine this field is those light dry grasses or something like that, it would have quite reflective light properties. So it could be very bright. But the main thing is not to get hung up on the technicalities, especially for this kind of art. The main goal is, for me, is to find something that just looks good. Like, and you want to break up the lights and darks. You don't want everything to start looking really heavy. So I think that's the real trick, is getting a nice look, but also creating something that's interesting to look at. You have to really balance what is right with what looks good. And it is possible that our buildings are just too light, but I'm not worried about that right now. So we can adjust these colors. We can continue to play with these, even though maybe you really liked where you got with the other colors, and that's okay too. So you can really just go back to those. For now, I'm kind of open to playing around with this a little bit until I get something I'm a little happier with. So right now, I think that's okay. I have a nice light in here, and then some darks in the front, and darker colors in the back. I might lighten that background hill up even more. The one that we threw in way back here. Let's lighten that up. And maybe I won't use a tritone on this one. Maybe what I'll do is let's just do the color correction and HLS. I know it's definitely a crude way to do it, but it's actually working pretty well. I'm pretty happy with how that's working. It doesn't always work so simply and so easily, but sometimes I just want to cool that off. So I don't want to move it into the warms. I might want to move it into the cooler colors or warm. It really depends. I just need to, the main thing is I need to push it closer to the color of the sky. And that could even mean desaturating it a little bit. Lighten it up a little more. So it's still dark. It's still a very dark shape, but it's not nearly as dark as the buildings. Well, it isn't as dark. It's still quite dark. Just increase that light a little more. So there, it's as bright as the sky. So we do have a lot of room to move. There we go. That's a little better. I think this middle guy can probably come up a little bit brighter too. Go color correction. Bring that lightness up. And right now, I'm really squinting my eyes quite a bit so that I'm not distracted by the colors as much. So you'll find if you squint your eyes, you will actually see value a little bit better. So when I squint my eyes, that's right for the value, but I think right now it just makes such a big light shape. I'd rather this be a little darker. I want it to be dark against those two shapes there and create a bit of a contrast, almost like green grass definitely absorbs more light than dry grass, so it will actually naturally be a bit darker. And we can always lighten this one a little further. But I think that's actually looking pretty good. I think it looks really quite great. Now, it's not 100%, the colors aren't 100% accurate, because if you were to turn off these sky gradients, you'd actually notice a significant shift in your color. So I'm just doing this on the fly as I look at it. And I'm finding that this is a little too monochromatic. This front hill, I want to increase its saturation a little bit and maybe warm it up. Really sure what to do with this one. So that's a strange one. I may do something different with that one. I mean, it looks good here, so maybe it'll end up looking okay once we're done. But right now, I'm not loving it. Okay, cool. Actually, let's just try moving it a bit. I'm gonna play with it. It may not even need to be there. Like, I think it's a bit heavy, actually. I find it's a little bit of it's a heavy shape just sitting there, and it's not very attractive. But can't make any major decisions yet because we still have work to do. So we can even just turn it off for now. Now this becomes a little bit flat. So this shape here could be either brightened up or some of these could be darkened. But maybe I'm just going to try hill number 2. Let's brighten it up a little more. Okay, then bring up that saturation just a touch more. Okay. That looks a little nicer. Cool. So we have some nice green, bright hills. We'll see. It could end up being too bright, but anyways, this whole process is a lot of experimentation. I've rendered a little bit of this so we can see it moving. I'm not loving where the third set of buildings are because it really outlines this building weird in the beginning. And that's an important thing. Even though it changes when we move, the predominant amount of time in the movement, that building's not in a very visually appealing place. And I think it's City 3. It's these guys right here. I don't like where they're sitting. Maybe I'll just move them over like that. Okay. So let's try that out. I'm just going to render that again. Once we start adding the effects for the lighting, it will look a lot nicer the way it's actually interacting with the buildings. Now, there are some things that happen when you start lighting that can cause problems when you have a lot of layers. When you have a lot of layers affecting the colors, because you might have to go back in. Like I might have to go back in and fix some of them. But just looking at this, I think we have a nice amount of depth. I think it's looking pretty good. Now, one thing you can do with the landforms here, like this hill here, the foreground hill. Right now, it's facing directly, like vertically up and down. What you can do is actually rotate it. Like, don't be afraid to rotate things so that they face more upwards. The only thing that can cause a problem with is when you do your lighting, because then your lighting changes on that object. And we'll get into that a little later, but we can actually rotate this object this way. So I'm rotating it away from the camera, essentially. Let's go into the custom view and have a look at it. I'm rotating it so it angles slightly upwards. Go look here. Go look at it. So it's angled upwards. And what this will do is it creates kind of the illusion that the landform is coming towards you. Now you can, if you want to be really picky about it, you can do that move. So you'll notice that when it's not rotated, it's a lot round, it's a lot rollier, the hill's rollier, and then when you rotate it, it kind of flattens out a little bit. And that's just because you're you're rotating it away from the camera. So let's put that at 25. What you can do to actually compensate against that is, first of all, increase the scale. So we'll go to 125 on the y-axis. And then if you've done that, you get like a parallax shift happening in the object as it recedes into the distance. So what you can do to combat that is, let's go back to the camera, is you can use a corner pin. So if you just go here, go to distort, and then just use the corner pins, you can pull out the left and right pin. Let's go over here. you can pull them out until you straighten out the image. And it's hard to tell with this image, but usually when you have more complicated or involved images, or you want to just make sure this corner lines up with this corner. So this is pulled out too much, but because there's really not that big of a shift happening on it. But so I'm not going to use that because that just adds another thing that has to be calculated and processed. But by doing this, you will create the most subtle sense of depth. It's pretty subtle, but it can actually make a pretty big difference when you are animating and moving your camera around a lot. I'm thinking of doing these really foreground bushes here. If I do all of these guys, if I do everything right away, what it does, if I do the furthest away stuff and then the closest stuff to the camera, it establishes the boundaries of the scene. So what my depth of my overall scene is. So sometimes it's nice to actually put the foreground objects in earlier rather than later. And this is where things start to get really tricky because there's so much traversal of a foreground object versus a background object. So we're going to move right past these guys. And if we want them really to fill the scene, like in the original image, when you look at that original image, everything's so nicely spaced apart, but the amount of space that these are going to have to cover is tremendous, these foreground objects versus these background ones over here. It's really going to take a little experimentation to get things looking the way we want. I actually find that city might be technically, compared to this image, it really doesn't span very far and it might need to be stretched out a little bit. So that's definitely something we can do. We can do it pretty easily right off the bat. And this is what you're going to want to play with because that's why I kept a backup of the original image. It's so that I can look at it and go back and forth and get a sense of what I like and what I don't like with what's happening with the image. So here I'm just expanding this city out a little bit more. It sort of feels a little bit more like the original image. And then let's bring that very far back city over just a bit. I'm going to create a nice and interesting skyline. Pretty good. A lot of depth. Okay. Anyways, we can play with all that stuff later and continue to play with it. And this is also something you're going to want to play with once you've better established your shots, because once the camera's moving, like I said, everything gets changed quite a bit. And I think you want to avoid creating really bloppy shapes. Like you want to have some areas where the sky is coming down into the city. So we don't want to completely eliminate in a shot the opportunity for the sky to cut down into that city to create a really nice skyline or an interesting skyline. We just don't want a big solid shape. Okay, so let's continue moving forward. So as you can see, as I'm playing with this camera, you can see these foreground objects are already moving fairly convincingly. But I'm going to start with the foliage that is supposed to sit in front of the city. Not this one, but this guy right here. Okay? And if you remember, we expanded everything out, and for good reason, because we are going to push this stuff right to the limits of what we have available. And the bigger I could make my pieces, the better off I would be because I have more to work with. Right now, it's important to consider where the camera is. The camera's at negative 53,000, I believe. So we want to put this, we could put this right in front of the camera if you wanted to. But we do want to create some objects that are I like creating objects that are very near to the camera. And as I bring them closer, I need to scale them down so that I don't totally lose my dimension. Because right now, this object is just going to drown the city right out. I don't want to do that. I don't even know, actually, in all honesty, if the camera's going to move this far, because we'll probably lose sight of Rocket Randee. Okay, so now you can see that for the majority of the time, that bush isn't even visible until we really settle here. So unless we come right to this point, we may end up having to move this guy around a little more. Let's turn the camera and just add a little bit of, make sure the depth of field's on. It shouldn't be this blurry. I think we are about to face a problem here. It looks like my actual lens angle is really small. Somehow this camera that we've been working with has a super, super long lens on it, which is, I guess, why everything was so spaced apart. I don't know why I didn't realize this earlier. Okay, so I've just realized that the camera, for some reason, is at a totally weird lens size. Like the angle here, you can see this angle of view is really off. So I'm gonna have to go back in and reposition a bunch of objects to get this to work properly. So as you can see, I've had to really adjust the camera, and this is why it is so important to set up your cameras first, because if you don't, you are going to have to deal with some major fixes, which I now have to deal with. Because now all my scaling is wrong and my backgrounds aren't going to work properly. So I'm gonna have to do this. It's good that I can do it now, but what I'm going to have to do is bring everything closer to the camera, because if you look at this camera now, the actual camera is much more realistically placed in the world, and now right now everything's just too far away and spaced too deeply. So I have to fix that. So I'm really sorry. I'm going to go through and fix that scene. But all the concepts that I've outlined to you are still very much the same. I think I would just make sure that you're starting with a much wider angled lens. I don't know why specifically that camera decided to be have such a long lens. I must have done something and not noticed. So what I have to do now is go back through all the layers that I placed so meticulously. I mean, the good thing is we did a bunch of color work, but I'm going to go back through and reposition all of them. And I may be able to maintain my distances, but I certainly won't be able to. Well, that's hard to say. I think my distances might be too great in between objects, because once you widen out the lens, what happens is things that are far apart seem further apart. So what I'm going to do is, let's just shut all this off. I'm going to do one thing at a time. I'll start with the sky and the background, and then I'll go from there. Okay, in the next video, I will take you through the process of correcting this mistake. I think it's a really good thing to see and experience, because it's happened to me a few times in my career. All is not lost, however. It's a fairly simple fix, and we caught it pretty early, so it's not a major problem, and there might be a few things to learn along the way. If you like what e.d.films is doing and want to stay up to date on the latest developments and tutorials, please show your support by liking us on Facebook.